The smell hit me first, copper and rot, as I slid open the toll booth window. Not again. My fingers trembled against the latch as cold night air rushed in, carrying that unmistakable scent. The digital clock on my dashboard blinked 2:37 a.m. 23 minutes before the truckers came. I'd been working the overnight shift at E470's Plaza C toll booth for 6 months now. The pay was decent, $21.50 an hour, plus that sweet night differential. And usually, the solitude was worth it. 8 hours of podcasts, minimal supervision, and the occasional sleepy commuter. But no one told me about the rules when I applied. No one mentioned what happens between 3 a.m. and 4:03 a.m. every night. My name is Daniel Reed, and I need to document what's happening here. If you're driving the E470 bypass around Denver at night, especially the eastern stretch near Aurora, I'm begging you take I-225 instead, because whatever comes through my booth in those 63 minutes isn't human, and I don't think they're paying to use the road. Sorry, I should back up. 3 days ago, my supervisor Ryan left a handwritten note taped to my time card. I thought it was the usual passive-aggressive reminder about booth cleanliness or cash handling procedures. Instead, it was 6 rules, scrawled in hasty, urgent handwriting. I laughed it off as a prank from the day shift guys. They were always trying to mess with me, especially Pete. But that night, when the clock ticked past 3 a.m. and a black Cadillac approached with its headlights off, I remembered rule number 1. If a vehicle approaches with no lights between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not look directly at the driver. Accept whatever they hand you. Say only, "Safe travels tonight." Do not count it until they're gone. That's when everything changed. Now Ryan's gone. Management says he transferred to a booth in Grand Junction, but his wife called looking for him yesterday, and these things keep coming through my toll booth every night, following patterns I've started to recognize. Patterns I have to respect if I want to see daylight again. The rules seem ridiculous, even impossible, but breaking them has consequences. I found that out when I accidentally violated rule number 4 my second week. I still have nightmares about what crawled out of the drainage ditch afterward. My shift starts at 11 p.m. and ends at 7 a.m. I'm alone out here on this stretch of toll road connecting E470 to Gun Club Road, with nothing but prairie and the distant lights of Aurora to keep me company. The moon hangs full tonight, casting the plains in silver. Beautiful, if you don't know what lurks in the tall grass. I've got the rules memorized now. 6 impossible rules that keep me alive for one more night. As I said, it's 2:37 a.m. now. They'll be coming soon, and I can already see headlights in the distance approaching fast. God help me. Hello, viewers. If you wish your stories or experiences to be narrated by me, share them on our own subreddit, which you can join from the description below. I will pick the stories from the community and narrate them, and every once in a while, we will host a 3-hour story compilation. My first night working the E470 toll booth was remarkably ordinary. That's what makes this all so unsettling, how everything seemed so normal until it wasn't. I'd been desperate for work after being laid off from my IT job in Denver. The Colorado Transportation Authority was hiring, offering decent pay and benefits for what appeared to be mindless work. Perfect, while I figured out my next career move. Night shift's not for everyone, the HR lady said during my orientation, studying me over her glasses. Especially out at Plaza C. That's why it pays more. I assumed she meant the isolation or boredom. I'd worked nights before in college. How bad could a toll booth be? Plaza C sits on the eastern stretch of E470, about 15 minutes from Aurora. During the day, it's just another toll plaza serving the suburban sprawl. At night, it transforms into something else entirely. A solitary island of fluorescent light surrounded by miles of darkness. My first week was uneventful. Traffic thinned to almost nothing after midnight. I'd process maybe 24 vehicles between midnight and dawn, mostly truckers and airport workers. The rest of the time I read books, listened to podcasts, or stared at the endless prairie stretching toward the mountains. It wasn't until my second Monday that things changed. I arrived for my shift at 10:45 p.m. as usual. The evening guy, Pete, was already packing up his things when I entered the small employee room behind the booths. "Hey, new guy," he said, not looking up. "Ryan wants to see you before you clock in." Ryan Miller was our supervisor, mid-50s, retired military, perpetually exhausted. I found him in his cramped office, staring at security camera feeds. "Reed, sit down." He pointed to a metal folding chair. "How you finding the night shift?" "Fine," I said. "Quiet." He nodded, still watching the monitors. "Tonight marks your 2-week probation checkpoint. According to protocol, I need to give you additional instructions." Something in his tone made me uneasy. He turned, fixed me with bloodshot eyes, and slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "Inside are special procedures for Plaza C, night shift. Memorize them. Do not discuss them with other employees. Do not record them electronically." He paused. "And Daniel?" "Follow them exactly." I laughed nervously. "What, is this some kind of hazing ritual? Pete put you up to this?" Ryan didn't smile. "This is not a joke. Lives depend on it, yours included." He checked his watch. "I need to go. Read those procedures before you start your shift. Destroy the paper afterward." After he left, I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 6 handwritten rules. If a vehicle approaches with no lights between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not look directly at the driver. Accept whatever they hand you. Say only "safe travels tonight." Do not count it until they're gone. If you hear knocking from inside your booth when no vehicle is present, do not respond or investigate. Continue working as normal. The knocking should stop after 7 minutes. If the same vehicle passes through your toll booth 3 times in one night, close your window after the 3rd passing and do not open it again until 4:30 a.m., regardless of waiting traffic. Never exit your booth between 12:48 a.m. and 5:17 a.m. If an emergency requires evacuation, leave the toll area completely. Do not remain in the vicinity of the booth. If you see a pedestrian walking along the shoulder, press the yellow emergency button 3 times, then the red button once. Do not speak to or acknowledge the pedestrian, even if they approach your booth. If a white van with Colorado license plate 470TLR stops at your booth, immediately press all emergency buttons, close all windows, and recite the Lord's Prayer aloud until the van leaves or until 4:03 a.m., whichever comes first. I read the list 3 times, convinced it was an elaborate prank. But something about Ryan's expression lingered in my mind. He hadn't been joking. That night passed without incident. No lightless vehicles, no knocking, no triple passers or white vans. By 5 a.m., I'd convinced myself it was indeed hazing for the new guy. The next night was the same, and the night after. On Thursday, I almost forgot about the rules entirely. Until 3:17 a.m., when a black Cadillac approached my booth with no headlights. My heart hammered against my ribs as I recalled rule number 1. The vehicle stopped perfectly at my window. I kept my eyes down, focusing on the toll display. A pale hand extended from the window, too pale, with fingers too long, and dropped several coins into my tray. "Safe travels tonight," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. The vehicle pulled away silently. Only then did I look up, catching just a glimpse of the Cadillac as it disappeared around the bend. no taillights, no license plate. I found not quarters, but 6 tarnished coins I didn't recognize. They bore markings in a script I'd never seen before. They felt unnaturally cold. By the time my shift ended at 7 a.m., I'd convinced myself I'd imagined it all. Sleep deprivation, stress from the career change, an overactive imagination fueled by those stupid rules. That had to be it. I slipped the strange coins into my pocket, intending to show them to Ryan as proof of Pete's elaborate prank. But when I entered the employee room, Pete was there alone, looking pale and shaken. "Where's Ryan?" I asked. "Transferred," Pete said flatly. "Effective immediately. They say he's working Grand Junction now." "That's weird. He didn't mention—" "Drop it, Reed," Pete snapped, gathering his things. "Just follow the rules, okay?" As he brushed past me, I noticed fresh bandages wrapped around his left forearm. Before I could ask, he was gone, leaving me alone with the growing certainty that the rules weren't a joke after all. And tonight would be my first full shift knowing what was really happening on E470 after midnight. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head during the drive home that morning. The rising sun painted the Rocky Mountains in gold, making the night's events seem like a bad dream. I took the strange coins from my pocket and examined them in the daylight. They looked almost normal now. Tarnished quarters with what appeared to be manufacturing defects. Nothing supernatural. Nothing worth losing sleep over. But I couldn't shake the image of that pale hand. I lived in a small apartment in Centennial, about 20 minutes from Plaza C. Despite the bright morning, I drew all the blinds before crawling into bed. Sleep came in fitful bursts, haunted by dreams of lightless vehicles and knocking sounds from inside closets. When my phone rang at 2 p.m., I jolted awake, heart racing. The caller ID showed CDOTHR. "Hello?" My voice was thick with sleep. "Mr. Reed, this is Marjorie from Human Resources. I'm calling about Supervisor Miller's departure." I sat up, suddenly alert. "Ryan transferred, right?" "To Grand Junction?" A pause. "Not exactly. Mr. Miller has taken an extended leave of absence for personal reasons. We're assigning an interim supervisor, but in the meantime, we need you to train a replacement for Plaza C night shift." "A replacement? I've only been there 2 weeks myself." "You're the senior night attendant now," she said flatly. "The new hire will shadow you tonight. His name is Marcus Valdez. Please review standard procedures with him." Before I could ask about the non-standard procedures, the 6 rules, she hung up. I arrived at Plaza C early that evening, hoping to find Pete and get some answers. The evening shift attendant wasn't Pete, but a woman I'd never seen before. "Pete called out," she explained, not meeting my eyes. "I'm covering from Plaza B. Where's the new guy?" As if on cue, a beat-up Honda pulled into the employee lot. A young man stepped out, early 20s, tall and lanky with a nervous energy about him. "Marcus?" I called. He nodded, jogging over. "You must be Daniel. First night on the job. Pretty excited about the night differential." I forced a smile. "Let's get you oriented before my shift starts." Over the next hour, I showed Marcus the standard procedures, how to operate the toll system, process credit cards, handle cash, and manage the nightly reports. All the while, Ryan's rules burned in my pocket, where I'd written them down, despite instructions to destroy them. Should I tell Marcus? Would he even believe me? What if it was all an elaborate joke that would make me look insane to the new guy? At 10:50 p.m., the evening attendant left without a word, leaving Marcus and me alone. I waited until 11:30, after processing a few cars, before broaching the subject. "So, there are some Unofficial procedures for the night shift? I began cautiously. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Yeah? Like what? I took a deep breath. It's going to sound crazy, but between 3 and 4 a.m., things get weird here. There are rules we need to follow. I explained the 6 rules as best I could, watching his expression shift from curiosity to amusement to concern. Dude, is this some kind of hazing thing? He laughed nervously. The graveyard shift pranking the new guy? I thought so too at first. But last night, I trailed off, remembering the Cadillac. Just follow the rules, okay? Better safe than sorry. Marcus held my gaze for a moment, then shrugged. Sure, whatever you say, boss. The night proceeded normally until about 1:30 a.m. Traffic had dwindled to nothing, and Marcus was scrolling through his phone while I filled out the midnight report. That's when the knocking started. Soft at first. Tap, tap, tap from somewhere inside our booth. Marcus looked up, confused. Did you hear that? I froze, remembering rule number 2. If you hear knocking from inside your booth when no vehicle is present, do not respond or investigate. Hear what? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Probably just the heating system. Tap, tap, tap. Louder now, clearly coming from inside the small cabinet beneath the counter. There's something in there, Marcus said, moving toward the cabinet. I grabbed his arm. No, leave it. It's probably just the building settling. Tap, tap, tap. Louder still. Marcus pulled away from me. Come on, man. It could be a rat or something. We should check. Marcus, remember what I told you about the rules. This is rule number 2. We ignore it, and it stops after 7 minutes. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're really buying into that crap? Look, I'll just... Bang! Something hit the cabinet door from inside, hard enough to make it rattle on its hinges. Marcus jumped back. What the hell? 6 more minutes, I whispered, checking my watch. Just ignore it. Keep working. Bang, bang. The entire booth seemed to shake. Screw this, Marcus muttered, reaching for the cabinet door. Don't! I lunged for him, but I was too late. He yanked the door open. The cabinet was empty. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Marcus turned to me with a triumphant smile. See? Nothing to... The lights in the booth flickered, then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, I could hear Marcus breathing heavily next to me. What the... Shh! I hissed, fumbling for my phone flashlight. The knocking resumed. Tap, tap, tap. But now it was coming from above us, from the ceiling. Marcus craned his neck to look up just as my phone light came on. I followed his gaze and immediately wished I hadn't. The ceiling was covered in dark, viscous liquid, dripping down in thick rivulets. And in the center, something was moving, pressing against the panels from above, making them bulge downward with each knock. Tap, tap, tap. We need to get out, I whispered, grabbing Marcus's arm again. Now. He stood frozen, staring upward as a ceiling panel began to separate from its frame. I yanked him toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. The handle turned freely, but the door itself seemed sealed shut, as if fused to the frame. The window, I gasped, moving toward the service window. That's when I remembered rule number 4. Never exit your booth between 12:48 a.m. and 5:17 a.m. I checked my watch. 1:37 a.m. We can't leave, I realized with sinking horror. Above us, the ceiling panel crashed to the floor, splattering us with the dark liquid. It smelled like copper and rot, the same smell from earlier. Blood, but wrong somehow. Older. Colder. Marcus screamed as something began to descend from the opening. a pale, elongated limb, too thin to be human, ending in a hand with impossibly long fingers. "Close your eyes!" I shouted, remembering Ryan's rules. "Don't look at it! Don't acknowledge it!" I squeezed my eyes shut, grabbing Marcus and pulling him to the floor. He was trembling violently, but he stopped screaming. For what felt like hours, we huddled there in silence. The only sounds our ragged breathing and the occasional soft tap of something moving around the booth. Exactly 7 minutes after the knocking began, the lights flickered back on. I cautiously opened my eyes. The ceiling panel was back in place. The liquid was gone. The booth looked completely normal. Marcus sat curled in a ball, eyes still screwed shut, rocking slightly. "It's over," I whispered. "You can look now." Slowly he opened his eyes, blinking in the harsh fluorescent light. His face was ashen, eyes wild with fear. What was that thing?" he croaked. I shook my head. "I don't know. But now do you believe me about the rules?" He nodded vigorously. Yeah, I believe you." We spent the rest of the night in tense silence, jumping at every sound. No cars came through until after 5 a.m., when a truck driver hauling produce to the Denver markets stopped to pay his toll. He looked at our pale faces with concern. "You boys all right?" "Look like you've seen a ghost. If only it had been just a ghost." Marcus called in sick the next day, and the day after that. On the third day, HR informed me he'd resigned, effective immediately. I was alone at Plaza C again, with 5 more rules to learn the hard way. After Marcus quit, I seriously considered following suit. I even drafted a resignation letter during my off hours, finger hovering over the send button. But something held me back. Not just the paycheck, but a growing obsession with understanding what was happening at Plaza C. I needed answers, and quitting wouldn't provide them. So I returned the next night, stopping first at a pawn shop in Aurora to buy a small silver cross. I'm not particularly religious, but rule number 6 mentioned the Lord's Prayer, so I figured some spiritual protection couldn't hurt. I also brought salt, a flashlight with fresh batteries, and a voice recorder, though I wasn't sure if that violated Ryan's instruction not to document the rules electronically. The evening shift attendant, back to being Pete, looking haggard and irritable, barely acknowledged me when I arrived. As he gathered his things to leave, I blocked the door. "Pete, we need to talk." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Nothing to talk about, Reed. 2 attendants quit in a week. Ryan's gone. Something's happening here, and I deserve to know what I'm dealing with." Pete's eyes darted to the security cameras, then back to me. "Not here," he muttered. "Starbud's Coffee on Gun Club Road. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Before I could respond, he pushed past me and was gone. Alone again, I settled into my booth for the night shift. Until 3 a.m., it was business as usual. A few late-night commuters, a couple of truckers. I kept checking my watch as the witching hour approached. At 2:55 a.m., I did a perimeter check of the booth from the inside, making sure all windows were secure and the door was locked. I placed the silver cross on the counter beside me. 3 a.m. came and went without incident. No lightless vehicles, no knocking. By 3:30, I had started to relax slightly. Maybe whatever entities haunted this stretch of toll road took nights off occasionally. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through job listings, still contemplating quitting despite my curiosity. Movement in my peripheral vision caught my attention. I looked up to see something that made my blood run cold. A figure walking along the shoulder of the highway, about 100 yards from my booth, moving slowly toward me. Rule number 5. If you see a pedestrian walking along the shoulder, press the yellow emergency button 3 times, then the red button once. Do not speak to or acknowledge the pedestrian, even if they approach your booth. My hands trembled as I located the emergency buttons, a panel of colored buttons meant for different situations like medical emergencies or accidents. I pressed the yellow button 3 times, then the red button once, not knowing what to expect. Nothing happened. No alarm. No response. The figure continued approaching, now close enough that I could make out details in the harsh glow of the toll plaza lights. It appeared to be an elderly woman in a long white nightgown, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She walked with a slight limp, head down, bare feet pale against the dark asphalt. What was an old woman doing walking along E470 at 3:30 in the morning? As she drew closer, I noticed other details that sent chills down my spine. Though it was only about 40 degrees outside, she showed no signs of being cold. Her nightgown wasn't moving in the wind that was strong enough to shake my booth, and her feet, they weren't touching the ground. She was floating, just an inch or 2 above the pavement. I pressed the yellow button 3 more times, then the red once again, harder this time. Still nothing. The woman was now just 50 feet from my booth, and I could see her face, or rather the absence of one. Where facial features should have been was just smooth, pale skin, with only the slightest indentation where a mouth might be. My instinct was to call 911, but I remembered the rules. Do not acknowledge the pedestrian. Instead, I turned away, focusing intently on my toll computer, pretending to work while my heart hammered in my chest. From the corner of my eye, I could see her approaching the booth, that slight indentation in her featureless face beginning to split, widening into something resembling a mouth. A sound came with it, not quite speech, but a high, keening whine like feedback from a microphone. She stopped directly outside my window, the keening growing louder. Though I wasn't looking directly at her, I could see her raise one pale, too long arm, fingers splayed against the glass. The temperature in the booth plummeted. My breath came out in visible puffs. The silver cross on the counter began to vibrate, then spin, as if caught in a miniature whirlwind. Tap, tap, tap. Her fingers against the glass, each tap leaving frost spiraling outward from the point of contact. The keening rose in pitch until it hurt my ears, but I kept my eyes fixed firmly on the computer screen, hands shaking so badly I could barely type. For 15 excruciating minutes, this continued. The tapping, the keening, the cold. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. From my peripheral vision, I saw her turn and drift back toward the highway, her form growing increasingly transparent until she vanished altogether. I exhaled a shuddering breath, finally daring to look up. The window where she'd touched it was covered in a complex pattern of frost. Not random, but deliberate whorls and symbols that looked almost like writing. As I watched, the frost began to melt, dripping down the glass like tears. By the time it had completely disappeared, the temperature in the booth had returned to normal. I slumped in my chair, emotionally drained. Whatever I had just encountered, I'd survived by following the rules. But what would have happened if I'd acknowledged her? What if I'd spoken to her, or, God forbid, opened the window? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. At 4:15 a.m., headlights appeared in the distance, a Colorado State Patrol cruiser. This wasn't unusual. Troopers occasionally passed through on their rounds. The cruiser slowed as it approached my booth. The officer, Jenkins, according to his nameplate, looked exhausted, his eyes rimmed with red. "Evening," he said, handing me his credit card for the toll. "Quiet night?" "Yes, sir," I replied automatically. "Not much traffic." Jenkins nodded, taking back his card. Then he hesitated. "You haven't seen anything unusual tonight, have you? Specifically, a pedestrian?" My mouth went dry. "No, sir. No pedestrians. His eyes narrowed slightly. You sure about that? Got a call about an elderly woman wandering along this stretch. Concerned citizen couldn't stop because of a child in the car, but they reported it about 40 minutes ago. I swallowed hard. Sorry, I haven't seen anyone. Jenkins studied me for a moment longer, then nodded. All right. If you do see someone, call it in immediately. Dangerous for folks to be walking on the highway, especially at night. Yes, sir. I will. As he pulled away, I let out a shaky breath. Had someone else seen the woman? Or was the trooper's visit connected to my pressing the emergency buttons? I got my answer an hour later when a tow truck arrived, its lights illuminating the pre-dawn darkness. The driver, a burly man in his 50s with Mike embroidered on his coveralls, approached my booth with a clipboard. Got a call about a stranded motorist, he said. Mile marker 17, just north of here. I didn't call for a tow, I said, confused. Mike checked his paperwork. Call came from this booth about 3:30 a.m. Emergency assistance for a woman named... He squinted at the form. Mary Ellicott? The name sent a jolt through me, though I couldn't say why. There must be some mistake. I didn't call anyone. Mike shrugged. System says the call came from here. Yellow button protocol, then red. That's the code for stranded elderly or disabled motorist. So that's what the button sequence did. It called for help. But who was Mary Ellicott? After Mike left, I spent the remaining hours of my shift searching the name on my phone. What I found made my skin crawl. Mary Ellicott had been a toll booth attendant on this very stretch of road back in the 1980s, long before E470 was built, when it was just a simple toll road connecting the eastern suburbs. According to a small Denver Post article from December 1982, she had disappeared during her shift one night. Her car was found still parked in the employee lot, her belongings untouched in the booth. The case had gone cold. More disturbing was what I found on a local history blog, a grainy photo of Mary from an employee newsletter, dated a month before her disappearance. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and a kind smile. She looked nothing like the featureless apparition I'd seen, but something about her posture, the way she held herself in the photo, was eerily familiar. The blogger had interviewed a retired highway patrol officer who mentioned rumors that Mary had reported strange visitors at her toll booth in the weeks before she vanished. The department had dismissed her concerns as the imagination of a lonely old woman working too many night shifts. As my shift ended and dawn broke over the plains, I sat in my car, staring at Plaza C in my rearview mirror. What had happened to Mary Ellicott? Was she the first to encounter whatever haunted this stretch of road? And most importantly, what would Pete tell me at our meeting later today? I had survived an encounter with what I now believe to be Mary's ghost, but somehow I knew this was just the beginning. There were still 4 more rules to learn about, 4 more horrors waiting in the long nights ahead. I didn't sleep much that morning. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the faceless woman, Mary Ellicott, tapping at my window. My apartment felt different somehow, as if the barrier between my work life and home life had thinned. Twice I jolted awake, convinced I heard tapping at my bedroom door. By 1:30 p.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and drove to Starbuds Coffee on Gun Club Road. The coffee shop was a small, locally owned place nestled between a gas station and a Western Union. I chose a table in the back corner, with a view of both the entrance and the parking lot. Pete arrived 15 minutes late, eyes darting nervously as he entered. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Unshaven, hair unwashed, wearing the same clothes he'd had on yesterday. He ordered a black coffee at the counter before slumping into the chair across from me. "You're still alive," he said, his voice hoarse. "Good." "No thanks to you," I replied. "What the hell is happening at Plaza C, Pete? I saw a ghost last night. An actual ghost. And I found out she used to work there, just like us." Pete flinched at the word ghost. "Lower your voice," he hissed, glancing around. "Not here. Car." We took our coffees to his beat-up Toyota in the far corner of the lot. Once inside, Pete locked all the doors and checked the mirrors before speaking. "They're not ghosts," he began, hands trembling slightly as he sipped his coffee. "At least not all of them. Some were never human to begin with." "What are they then?" Pete rubbed his face. "Hell if I know. Demons? Interdimensional travelers? The highway department calls them anomalies in the official documentation. All I know is they've been using that stretch of road as a crossing point for decades." "Crossing from where to where? If I knew that, I wouldn't be working a toll booth, would I?" Pete snapped. Ryan had theories. He thought the toll road was built over something older, a trail maybe, that certain entities used long before highways existed. I thought about the strange coins the Cadillac driver had given me. "So these entities, they pay tolls? Why?" Pete gave a humorless laugh. "Transactions require consent. As long as we're officially allowing them passage by accepting payment, they have to follow certain rules too. It's like inviting a vampire into your home. There are cosmic protocols, I guess." "And if we break the rules?" Pete's face darkened. He slowly rolled up his sleeve, revealing the bandaged forearm I'd noticed before. The bandages were spotted with something dark, not quite blood, more like the viscous liquid that had dripped from the ceiling during the knocking incident. "This is from breaking rule number 3, he said quietly. I had the same car come through 3 times. The third time, I was distracted, didn't realize it was the same vehicle until too late. I processed the toll instead of closing my window." He unwrapped the bandage. I recoiled at the sight. His flesh was riddled with small, perfectly circular holes, as if something had taken dozens of precise core samples from his arm. The edges of each hole glistened with that dark substance. "It doesn't heal," Pete whispered. "And the doctors, they can't even see it. They think I'm crazy when I show them." I fought the urge to vomit. "What about Ryan? What happened to him?" Pete rewrapped his arm, wincing. "White van, rule number 6. He didn't recite the prayer fast enough." He stared out the windshield, eyes unfocused. "I found his booth empty the next morning. Just a puddle of that black stuff on the floor and the smell of sulfur." "Jesus," I breathed. "Why doesn't the highway department shut it down? Or at least warn people?" "They have a deal," Pete said, his voice dropping even lower. "Made back in the 70s when they first built the toll road. I don't know the details, but Ryan found documents, cost-benefit analyses comparing acceptable casualties versus projected revenue from the arrangement." "Arrangement with what? Who are they dealing with?" Pete shook his head. "Ryan called them the collectors. Said they were like customs agents for whatever exists on the other side of wherever they come from. They collect more than money, though." A chill ran through me. "What else do they collect?" "Memories, time, life force. Depends on which one you encounter." Pete took another swig of coffee. Ryan had a whole filing cabinet of research at his house. Newspaper clippings, witness accounts, correlations between toll booth disappearances and astronomical events. "We should go there," I said. "Maybe there's something that can help us." Pete let out a bitter laugh. "Good luck with that. Day after Ryan vanished, his house burned to the ground. Official report said faulty wiring." We sat in silence for a minute, the implications sinking in. This wasn't just supernatural, it was institutional. The highway department knew. They were complicit. "Why are you telling me all this now?" I finally asked. Pete's eyes met mine, and I saw genuine fear there. "Because you're marked now. Once you've seen them, really seen them, they notice you, and not just at the booth." I remembered the tapping I thought I'd heard at my apartment. "They can find us at home?" "Eventually. Ryan lasted 8 years. I'm going on 4. Pete pulled out a small leather pouch from his pocket. "Here, iron filings mixed with salt. Line your windows and doors at home. It buys you time." As I took the pouch, Pete grabbed my wrist. "There's something else you should know. The rules, they change sometimes. Not the written ones, those are constants. But there are exceptions. Special nights." "What do you mean? Solstices, equinoxes, astronomical alignments, the blood moon next month?" He trailed off, then continued more urgently. "If you work those nights, there's a 7th rule. If you see a child standing alone in your lane, activate the toll barrier and lock your booth until they leave, no matter how long it takes." "A child? What?" "It's not a child." Pete cut me off. "Trust me, no matter what it looks like, no matter what it says or how it cries, it's not a child." I nodded slowly, tucking the pouch into my jacket. "Thanks for the warning. Is there anything else I should know?" Pete hesitated. "Yeah, quit. Today, while you still can." "You haven't." "I've tried." His voice cracked slightly. 3 times. Each time, something happened. My mom had a stroke the first time. Car accident the second. 3rd time my apartment building had a gas leak, killed my neighbor. He looked away. Could be coincidence, but after a while... "You stop believing in coincidences," I finished for him. Pete checked his watch. "I gotta go. Got a second job now. Fewer hours at the booth means fewer chances for them to notice me." As he started the car, I asked one last question. "The coins, the ones they sometimes pay with, what are they?" "Collection markers," Pete said grimly. "Each one represents something they've taken from someone else. Don't keep them. Bury them at a crossroads or throw them into running water before dawn." I thought of the strange coins still sitting in my bedside drawer. "What happens if you don't?" Pete just looked at me, the bags under his eyes suddenly more pronounced. "They find you faster." He dropped me back at the coffee shop, and I watched his Toyota disappear down Gun Club Road, wondering if I'd see him again. That night, before heading to my shift, I drove to Cherry Creek State Park. At the spot where the creek was widest, I threw the strange coins as far as I could into the running water. They made no splash as they hit the surface, simply vanishing as if the water had swallowed them whole. As I drove to Plaza C, the sun setting blood red over the Rockies, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a line, that by disposing of the coins, I'd acknowledged the reality of what was happening. I was no longer a skeptic playing along with superstition. I was a believer, and somehow that made me more vulnerable than ever. After my meeting with Pete, I considered calling in sick. But something told me that breaking routine might be more dangerous than facing whatever waited at Plaza C. I arrived for my shift precisely at 10:45 p.m., my pocket heavy with iron filings and salt. To my surprise, Pete was still working when I arrived. "Thought you'd be gone by now," I said, setting down my backpack in the employee room. Pete was organizing receipt papers with mechanical precision, not looking up. "Marjorie asked me to stay late, said you requested a schedule change." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I didn't request anything." Pete finally met my eyes, and I saw something was terribly wrong. His gaze was vacant, pupils dilated to pinpoints despite the dim lighting. You told Marjorie you wanted to start at midnight instead of 11, he said, his mouth moving stiffly. She asked me to cover until you arrive, but you're early. I took a cautious step back. This wasn't Pete, not entirely. Are you okay? Fine, he said, tilting his head at an unnatural angle. Just tired. Very tired. You should be tired too, Daniel. So tired you might sleep through your shift. Maybe forever. My hand went to the iron filings in my pocket. Who am I talking to right now? Pete's face split into a grin too wide for his features. Smart boy. Smarter than the last one. Ryan thought he could share what he learned. Look where that got him. I swallowed hard. What did you do to Pete? Nothing permanent. Yet. Pete's body stood, movements jerky, as if controlled by an unskilled puppeteer. Consider this a courtesy call. The arrangement works best with minimal interference. Keep to yourself, follow the rules, collect the tolls. That's all. And if I don't? Pete's head rotated further than humanly possible, his neck making a sickening cracking sound. There are worse things than disappearing, Daniel Reed. Much worse. His body convulsed suddenly, and he collapsed against the desk, knocking papers to the floor. When he straightened, his eyes had returned to normal, confusion replacing the vacant stare. Reed? What? What happened? He touched his neck, wincing. Did I black out? Something like that, I said cautiously. You were talking about my schedule change, but I didn't request one. Pete looked disoriented. Schedule change? No, I need to go. He grabbed his jacket, moving unsteadily toward the door. Be careful tonight, he added, his voice barely audible. They're agitated. After he left, I sprinkled a thin line of iron filings and salt across the threshold of the employee room and the booth. Small protection, perhaps, but it made me feel marginally better as I settled in for what promised to be a very long night. The first few hours passed without incident. Traffic was lighter than usual, just a few cars before midnight, then nothing. The silence was oppressive, making every creak and electronic hum of the booth seem amplified. At 2:17 a.m., headlights appeared in the distance. As the vehicle approached, I recognized a silver Honda Civic, unremarkable except for a Denver Broncos bumper sticker and a cracked windshield. The driver, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, handed me exact change without a word. 40 minutes later, the same Honda approached from the opposite direction. Same driver, same vacant expression. This wasn't unusual on its own. People sometimes realized they'd forgotten something and turned around. But combined with Pete's warning about agitation among the entities, I felt a prickle of unease. I processed the toll, watching carefully as the Honda drove away. Rule number 3, if the same vehicle passes through your toll booth 3 times in one night, close your window after the third passing and do not open it again until 4:30 a.m., regardless of waiting traffic. At precisely 3:33 a.m., headlights approached again. The silver Honda, returning a third time. My hand hovered over the window control as the car slowed to a stop at my booth. The woman looked exactly the same, except for her eyes, now solid black, reflecting no light. She held out a handful of coins, her arm extending impossibly far from the car window, stretching like putty. I slammed my hand on the window control. The glass pane began to descend, but suddenly hitched halfway down. Jammed. The woman's face split into a grin that stretched literally from ear to ear, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Her elongated arm snaked through the half-open window, fingers multiplying like branches as they reached for me. I stumbled backward, knocking over my chair. The hand, no longer recognizable as human, scrabbled against the interior of the booth, leaving smoking gouges in the counter where its fingers touched. My back hit the rear wall of the booth, nowhere left to retreat. The arm continued extending, now joined by a second that squeezed through the gap in the window. Both appendages twisted toward me like heat-seeking missiles. In desperation, I grabbed the pouch of iron filings and salt, tearing it open and flinging the contents at the invading limbs. The effect was immediate. A shriek like metal against metal erupted from outside as the arms recoiled, the flesh where the mixture had touched bubbling and smoking. I lunged for the window control, jamming it repeatedly. The window jerked downward another inch, then reversed direction, finally sliding closed. Through the glass, I could see the Honda driver, or whatever was wearing her shape, thrashing in her seat, the two long arms retracting in spasms back into her body. The car's engine revved to a scream. Tires squealed as it shot forward, weaving erratically before disappearing into the darkness beyond the toll plaza. My legs gave out, and I slid to the floor, gasping for breath. The gouges in the counter continued to smoke, filling the booth with an acrid stench like burning plastic. Where the iron and salt had touched the creature, a small puddle of blackish liquid was congealing on the floor. I checked my watch. 3:37 a.m., nearly an hour before I could safely open the window again, according to rule number 3. At 3:52 a.m., a vehicle approached, a Colorado Department of Transportation maintenance truck. The driver, a man in an official uniform, stopped at my booth and gestured for me to open the window. I shook my head, pointing at my watch, then holding up fingers to indicate I couldn't open until 4:30. The man frowned, then held up a C.ID badge, pressing it against the glass. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear through the closed window, but I could read his lips. Emergency maintenance. Open up. I hesitated. Was this legitimate or another test? The man looked normal, his behavior appropriate for a highway worker needing access. But the timing, less than 20 minutes after the Honda incident, seemed too convenient. The maintenance worker grew visibly frustrated, pounding on the window. He reached for something in his truck, then returned with an official-looking document that he held against the glass. An emergency work order, complete with state letterhead. My instinct screamed that something was wrong. I shook my head again and pointed firmly at my watch. The man's expression changed, subtle at first, then dramatically. His features seemed to melt, eyes sinking deeper into his skull while his mouth stretched impossibly wide. Not opening, but actually widening across his face. His uniform rippled as something beneath it shifted and rearranged. He pressed his transforming face against the window, the glass frosting over around the contact point. A sound penetrated the booth, not coming through the glass but somehow originating inside my head. A voice like grinding stones. Let me in. I scrambled backward, knocking over the trash can. The face pressed harder against the glass, which began to crack from the pressure. Small fractures spiderwebbed outward from the point of contact. The digital clock on my console read 4:03 a.m. Still 27 minutes before I could open according to rule number 3. But the glass wouldn't hold that long. In desperation, I grabbed my phone and pulled up the image of the rules I'd secretly photographed. Maybe there was something I'd missed, some exception or emergency protocol. My eyes fell on rule number 4. Never exit your booth between 12:48 a.m. and 5:17 a.m. If an emergency requires evacuation, leave the toll area completely. Do not remain in the vicinity of the booth. This certainly qualified as an emergency. But leaving meant abandoning my post, potentially violating my contract with the highway department, and worse, breaking the agreement with whatever entities controlled this stretch of road. The window cracked further, a large fissure appearing down the center. The thing outside no longer resembled a human at all. Its face had widened to cover most of the window, features rearranging into something insectoid. I had seconds, not minutes, to decide. Grabbing my backpack, I lunged for the rear door of the booth, yanking it open. Cold night air hit me as I stumbled onto the service walkway behind the toll plaza. The sound of breaking glass confirmed my window had finally given way. I ran without looking back, sprinting along the service road that paralleled the highway. My car was parked in the employee lot, but that would require doubling back toward the booth. Not an option. Instead, I continued along the service road, heading toward the Gun Club Road interchange about a mile away. Behind me, I heard a sound like tearing metal, followed by an inhuman screech that echoed across the empty plains. The plains of eastern Colorado are deceptively open, seemingly flat and featureless until you're actually trying to cross them. The service road degraded into gravel, then dirt, then disappeared altogether. I found myself stumbling through knee-high prairie grass, the scattered lights of distant aurora barely visible on the horizon. My lungs burned, legs trembling with exertion. I'd never been athletic, and the adrenaline that had carried me this far was fading fast. When I risked a glance over my shoulder, I saw something moving in the darkness behind me, not following the road, but cutting directly across the prairie, moving with a skittering, multi-limbed gait. It was gaining on me. Ahead, the lights of Gun Club Road seemed impossibly distant. I'd never make it. The thing would catch me long before I reached safety. Then I remembered Pete's words about crossroads, places of power where realities intersect. The service road I'd been following had disappeared, but it must have crossed other access paths or drainage routes. I changed direction, veering toward what looked like a culvert in the dim moonlight. As I drew closer, I saw it was indeed a drainage channel cutting beneath a maintenance access path, creating a crude crossroads of sorts. The sound behind me grew louder, a chitinous clicking combined with a wet, slithering noise. I didn't dare look back again. Reaching the crossing point, I stumbled to my knees at its center. I had no coins to bury, no offerings to make. All I had was desperation and the remaining iron and salt mixture in my pocket. I scattered it in a circle around me, hands trembling so badly that the distribution was uneven. Would it be enough? Did I even believe it would work? The clicking stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I sensed something watching, evaluating, from just beyond the range of my vision. For long minutes, I knelt there, afraid to move, afraid to look up. The eastern sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly, the first hint of approaching dawn. As the faintest edge of the sun breached the horizon, I finally dared to raise my head. The prairie around me was empty. Whatever had pursued me was gone, or at least no longer visible. I collapsed onto my back, staring up at the lightning sky, too exhausted to move. I had survived the night, but at what cost? I had abandoned my post, broken the unwritten agreement, and now the entities knew I was aware of them, knew I was actively resisting. As I lay there, watching dawn crawl across the Colorado sky, I realized I had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The rules had changed, and I had 3 more nights to work before my scheduled days off. 3 more opportunities for the collectors to exact their revenge. I spent the day in a cheap motel off Colfax Avenue. After dragging myself from the Prairie Crossroads to Gun Club Road, I'd managed to catch a ride with a trucker heading into Aurora. He didn't ask why I was wandering alone at dawn, covered in dirt and wild-eyed with fear. In Denver, some questions are better left unasked. From the motel, I called in to report what had happened, or a sanitized version of it. I claimed vandals had broken into the booth, forcing me to flee for my safety. The highway department representative sounded skeptical, but said they'd send a maintenance crew to secure the booth before my next shift. "You are coming in tonight, right?" she asked, something strange in her tone. Not concern, but almost anticipation. "Of course," I lied, already planning my escape from Colorado. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the sagging motel bed, staring at my reflection in the darkened TV screen. My choices were limited. I could run, pack whatever I could fit in my car, and drive as far as possible. But Pete's warning echoed in my mind. He'd tried quitting 3 times, and each attempt had resulted in accidents affecting him or those close to him. What about disappearing completely? New name, new state, leaving everything behind. I had enough savings to disappear for a while, but not forever. Eventually, I'd need to work, establish a paper trail. As I weighed my options, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Running won't help. They found Ryan in Tucson. 3rd floor apartment, windows lined with salt. Didn't matter. "Come to your shift tonight. We can help each other." No signature, but it had to be Pete. How had he gotten my number? I'd never given it to him. I tried calling back, but the number was already disconnected. By evening, exhaustion had overtaken my fear. I hadn't slept since before my last shift, and the adrenaline crash left me barely functional. I showered, trying to wash away the lingering scent of prairie dirt and whatever had oozed from the thing that attacked me. The water ran black for the first few minutes, then clear, but I couldn't shake the feeling of contamination. When I arrived at Plaza C at 10:45 p.m., I was surprised to find the booth already occupied. A woman in her early 40s sat inside, processing tolls with mechanical efficiency. She glanced up as I approached, her face completely devoid of expression. "Daniel Reed?" she asked as I entered the employee room. Yes, I wasn't told there would be someone covering my shift. Temporary arrangement. I'm Teresa. She didn't offer a hand to shake. "You'll be in booth B tonight. Your booth is still under repair." I hadn't noticed booth B was operational. It had been closed for maintenance since I started working here. A chill ran through me. Something felt off. "Why not just give me the night off?" I asked. Teresa's eyes flicked to the security camera in the corner, then back to me. "Management insists. Booth B is ready." She handed me a key with a yellow plastic tag. Same rules apply. The way she emphasized rules made my skin crawl. Booth B was positioned about 50 yards from my usual booth, slightly offset from the main toll lanes. It was visibly older, its paint faded, and the overhead lights dimmer. As I approached, I noticed symbols etched into the metal frame around the door. Not graffiti, but deliberate markings that looked almost like the frost patterns Mary Ellicott's ghost had left on my window. Inside, the booth was functionally identical to mine, but felt different, colder, with a lingering smell like old pennies and something organic decaying. The digital toll display flickered periodically, numbers momentarily scrambling before resolving back to normal. At exactly 11 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another text from an unknown number. "You're in her booth now. Mary's booth. They moved it when they built the new plaza. Bad place to be after 3 a.m. Watch for the van. The white van with Colorado license plate 470TLR from rule number 6. I checked my pockets. I'd brought more iron filings and salt, a small silver cross, and a printed copy of the Lord's Prayer just in case. For the first few hours, traffic was normal, mostly truckers and airport workers. I processed their tolls mechanically, fighting fatigue, jumping at every unusual sound. At 2:30 a.m., Teresa left her booth and approached mine, holding a thermos. "Coffee?" she offered, her expression still unnervingly blank. I hesitated, then accepted it through the narrow service window. "Thanks." "First time in booth B?" She didn't wait for my answer. "It has a history. They should have retired it years ago." "Why haven't they?" Teresa's eyes darted to the security cameras again. "Some booths need to stay in service. Part of the arrangement." "What arrangement?" I pressed, hoping she might reveal more than Pete had. Her face twitched, almost imperceptibly. "You know enough already. Drink your coffee. Stay alert. Don't fall asleep, whatever you do." She walked away before I could respond. I sniffed the coffee suspiciously, but detected nothing unusual. Still, I set it aside, unwilling to risk it. Fatigue pulled at me, my eyelids growing heavier with each passing minute. I pinched myself, slapped my cheeks, anything to stay awake. The clock read 2:59 a.m. when I heard the distinctive rumble of a diesel engine approaching. Headlights appeared in the distance, not the usual white lights, but a sickly yellow glow that barely illuminated the road ahead. As the vehicle drew closer, my stomach dropped. A white van, older model, with Colorado plates. I couldn't make out the full number yet, but the first 3 digits were clearly 470. Rule number 6. If a white van with Colorado license plate 470TLR stops at your booth, immediately press all emergency buttons, close all windows, and recite the Lord's Prayer aloud until the van leaves or until 4:03 a.m., whichever comes first. My hands shook as I readied myself, fingers hovering over the emergency panel. The van slowed as it approached, its engine noise changing pitch to a guttural growl that sounded wrong for any normal vehicle. Under the plaza lights, I could now see the license plate clearly. 470TLR. I slammed my hand down on the emergency buttons, all of them in rapid succession. The booth's window automatically began to close just as the van came to a stop directly outside. The driver was silhouetted against the dim interior lighting of the van, a humanoid shape, but wrong somehow, too tall for the vehicle, head bent at an uncomfortable angle against the ceiling. It turned toward me with deliberate slowness. With the window now sealed, I fumbled for the paper in my pocket, unfolding it with trembling hands. The Lord's Prayer. I began to recite, my voice cracking. "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." The silhouette tilted its head as if listening. Then it raised a hand, too large with too many joints and pressed it against the driver's window. The glass frosted over instantly, ice crystals spreading in complex fractal patterns. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. The temperature in my booth plummeted. My breath came out in white clouds, the cold so intense it burned my lungs. The digital display on my console flickered rapidly, numbers cycling through random sequences before settling on a single repeating pattern. 470. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. The driver's door of the van opened with a screech of protesting metal. The silhouette began to unfold itself from the cabin, rising, impossibly tall and thin, limbs articulating in ways human bones could never move. As we forgive those who trespass against us. It stepped onto the pavement, its form obscured by the van itself, but I could see its shadow stretching across the toll plaza, elongated, spindly, with too many appendages sprouting and retracting as it moved. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. The shadow grew as the thing approached my booth, stretching upward until it loomed over the roof. Something heavy landed above me with a dull thud, making the entire structure shake. Dust and insulation rained down from the ceiling panels. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. I finished the prayer, then started again immediately, voice steadier now despite my terror. Above me, something began to move across the roof. A slow, deliberate crawling sound punctuated by sharp taps, as if it were testing the structure for weaknesses. Tap, tap, scrape. I continued praying, cycling through the words again and again. My voice became mechanical, detached from conscious thought. The crawling above circled the perimeter of the booth, pausing occasionally to prod at the seams where roof met walls. The digital clock on my console blinked 3:42 a.m. 21 minutes to go. Tap, tap, crack. A hairline fracture appeared in the ceiling panel directly above me, black liquid beginning to seep through the crack. I kept praying, the words tumbling out faster now, almost tripping over each other in my haste. The liquid formed a perfect circle on the ceiling, expanding slowly as more seeped through. It began to bulge downward, stretching like a water balloon about to burst. Something solid pressed against the membrane. What looked like fingers, too many fingers, probing the barrier. Deliver us from evil, for thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory. The console clock read 3:58 a.m. 5 more minutes. The bulge stretched further, the dark liquid now almost touching the top of my head as I pressed myself against the far wall. The fingers became a hand, pushing through the membrane without breaking it, like a glove being turned inside out. Forever and ever, Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven. 4:01 a.m. The hand had fully emerged, pale, almost translucent, with 7 elongated fingers ending in points rather than nails. It rotated slowly, as if getting its bearings, then oriented toward me, fingers splaying wide. Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. 4:02 a.m. The hand lunged downward, stretching impossibly to cross the distance between us. I screamed, but kept praying, the words barely coherent now. The pointed fingertip stopped just inches from my face, trembling with effort or restraint. I couldn't tell which. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. 4:03 a.m. The hand recoiled as if burned, withdrawing back through the membrane with a sound like wet leather stretching. The bulge receded, the liquid being sucked back through the crack in the ceiling. Above me, the crawling resumed, moving away from the center of the booth toward the edge. A moment later, I heard the van door slam shut. The engine growled to life, and yellow headlights swept across the booth as the vehicle pulled away, accelerating quickly into the darkness. The temperature in the booth gradually returned to normal. The console display stopped flickering, returning to its standard readout. The only evidence of what had happened was the hairline crack in the ceiling panel, now dry and barely visible. I slumped to the floor, exhausted and shaking. I had survived an encounter with whatever entity rule number 6 was designed to ward against, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that it would return, and next time, 4:03 a.m. might come too late. The rest of the night passed without incident. When my shift ended at 7 a.m., Teresa was waiting in the employee room, her expression still unreadable. "You survived," she said, more statement than question. "The van came," I replied, my voice hoarse from hours of praying. "What was that thing?" Teresa checked the corridor before closing the door. "We call it the Collector. The original one. Been coming through here since before the toll road even existed." "What does it collect?" "People, mostly." She pulled a flask from her jacket and took a long swig. "Toll workers, specifically. Authorized by the agreement." I collapsed into a chair, too exhausted to remain standing. "What agreement?" "Everyone keeps mentioning it, but no one will explain." Teresa's eyes narrowed. "Because knowing too much makes you a target. Ryan knew too much. Started digging where he shouldn't have." She hesitated, then sat across from me. "But you've seen the van now, so you're already marked. Might as well know what you're dying for." "I'm not dying for anything," I protested weakly. She ignored me. "It was 1952 when they first paved this stretch as a county road. Before that, it was just a dirt track across the prairie. But this path has been here much longer. The Arapaho used it, said it followed a natural fault line in the world." "A fault line?" "A thin spot, a place where other places can be accessed." She took another drink. "When they built the toll road in the 70s, they discovered why the Arapaho avoided traveling this path at night. Vehicles would disappear, strange lights, motorists reporting impossible things. I thought of the lightless Cadillac, the Honda with its inhuman driver. The entities. The Department of Transportation nearly abandoned the project. Then someone had the bright idea to negotiate." Teresa's laugh was bitter. "They found an interpreter, someone who could communicate with the things coming through. Struck a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Controlled access. The entities get to use the road during certain hours, and in return they don't interfere with normal traffic at other times. The tolls are permission, I guess. A ritual acknowledgement." I leaned forward. "And the toll workers?" "Sacrifices," she said bluntly. 2 per decade. The agreement requires human attendance, no automated booths on this stretch, and occasionally one of us disappears. The realization hit me like a physical blow. That's why they hired me so quickly. No background check, minimal training. Teresa nodded. Fresh meat. They prefer hiring people with few connections, new to the area, limited family ties, less paperwork when you vanish. "And you're okay with this?" I asked incredulously. "I've been here 15 years, she said, eyes hollow. "Longest serving attendant on record. I don't break rules, I don't ask questions, and I'm valuable to them because I train the replacements." She glanced at me. "No offense." "How many?" My voice was barely a whisper. "During my time? 7, including Ryan last month. We're overdue, actually. The collector usually takes someone during the spring equinox, but it left empty-handed this year." I thought about the white van, how it had tested the booth for weaknesses, how the hand had stopped just short of grabbing me. "Because I followed the rules." "Exactly. The rules are our only protection. Break them. You're fair game." I stood, anger overriding my exhaustion. "This is insane. It's human trafficking. We need to go to the police, the FBI, someone." Teresa's laugh was hollow. "You think they don't know? The State Patrol has special protocols for this stretch of highway. Local authorities mark disappearances from Plaza C as transfer requests. This goes all the way up, Reed. The governor's office signs off on the maintenance budget that includes the special accommodations line item." I sank back into my chair, mind reeling. "So we're just supposed to accept this? Keep collecting tolls until one of us gets collected?" She shrugged. "It's a living until it isn't." "I can't do this," I said, standing again. "I quit." Teresa's expression finally changed, a flicker of genuine concern. "Bad idea. Remember what happened to Ryan? You said he disappeared because he knew too much." "After he tried to quit," she clarified. 3 transfer requests, all denied. Then he threatened to go public. 2 days later, the van came specifically for him. I remembered Pete's warning about his own attempts to leave. "So we're trapped here?" "Not necessarily." Teresa leaned closer, voice dropping. "There's a loophole in the agreement. You can't quit, but you can be promoted." "Promoted to what?" "Management. CDOT office in Denver. No direct contact with the toll booths, so you're outside the collector's jurisdiction." Her eyes bored into mine. "One position opens next month. I've been working toward it for years, but..." She gestured at her face, her body. "I don't fit their corporate image. You might..." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need an ally who understands what's happening. Someone who can work from the inside to change things once I'm gone." She checked her watch and stood abruptly. "I've said too much. Get some rest. You're back in booth C tonight." "My old booth? I thought it was damaged." "They fixed it. Quickly." Her expression darkened. "They want you back there. Specifically you." After she left, I sat alone in the employee room, weighing my options. Teresa's promotion plan seemed like my only possible escape, but it would take time. Time I wasn't sure I had. The entities were growing more aggressive, more focused on me personally. I had one more night to survive before my scheduled days off, one more night in Booth C, where this had all started. I arrived for my shift that night to find Booth C looking untouched, as if the previous night's attack had never happened. The window I'd seen shatter was intact, the counter unmarked by the acidic touch of the entity that had pursued me. Teresa was nowhere to be found, and the evening attendant left quickly when I arrived, avoiding eye contact. The booth felt different somehow, the air heavier, charged with potential energy like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. As I settled in for my shift, I found a note taped beneath the counter, hidden from the security cameras. "They're watching tonight. All of them. The collector makes its final choice at 3:33. Follow all rules, no exceptions, no matter what you see or hear." My third night of awareness had transformed the routine of the job. Every approaching vehicle became a potential threat, every shadow a lurking entity. Even legitimate customers seemed suspect. Did that trucker's eyes reflect the light strangely? Why did that woman's voice sound so flat? By 2 a.m., traffic had stopped completely. The highway stretched empty in both directions, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the booth's heating system and the occasional crackle of the radio scanner. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from a blocked number. "Get out now. They're coming for you tonight. The agreement has changed." Pete's warning sent a chill through me. But where could I go? Running had only made me more vulnerable last night. At least in the booth, I had the rules to protect me. At 2:45 a.m., I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. The distant but distinctive backfire of a van's engine. Yellow headlights appeared on the horizon, approaching slowly. The white van was returning earlier than before. But this time, it wasn't alone. Behind it, a procession of vehicles stretched into the distance. The black Cadillac with no lights, the silver Honda with its inhuman driver, and dozens more I hadn't seen before, all driving in perfect formation, maintaining exact distances between them. I grabbed my phone to text Teresa, but the screen showed no signal. The emergency buttons on my console likewise seemed dead, their indicator lights dark. As the procession drew closer, I noticed something else. Walking alongside the vehicles were figures, humanoid but wrong, some too tall, others moving with jerky insectoid motions. Among them, I recognized the faceless woman in white, Mary Ellicott, floating slightly above the pavement. The white van reached my booth first, stopping perfectly centered in my lane. Its engine idled with that wrong, organic growl. The driver's side remained empty. Whatever had operated it the previous night was now walking with the procession. One by one, the vehicles lined up behind it, forming an orderly queue that stretched beyond my field of vision. The walking figures took positions between the vehicles, all facing my booth with unnerving stillness. The digital clock on my console blinked 3 a.m. The passenger door of the white van opened, and Pete stepped out. My heart sank. Not Pete, not really. His movements were too smooth, his face blank as he approached my booth. When he reached my window, his eyes were solid black, reflecting the booth's fluorescent lights like polished stones. "Daniel Reed," he said, his voice overlaid with multiple tones speaking in unison. "The collectors have convened to address a breach in the arrangement." I said nothing, remembering the rules. Pete, or the thing wearing Pete, placed a hand on my window. "Your predecessors have upheld the covenant for 74 years. 2 souls per decade, willingly surrendered. But you..." He tilted his head at an impossible angle. "You resist. You know too much. You spread this knowledge to others." Beyond him, I could see the assembled entities watching, waiting. Some had features that shifted and changed as I observed them. Others remained in shadow, despite the bright toll plaza lights. "The terms must be renegotiated," Pete continued. "A new price established." I remained silent, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "3 options are presented." He held up a finger. 1. You surrender willingly now. The original arrangement continues. Another finger. 2. You provide a substitute, the woman who shared forbidden knowledge with you. A third finger. 3. The agreement ends. The barriers between worlds collapse completely. I thought of Teresa, who had tried to help me, of the promotion she'd mentioned, the loophole that might save one of us. What happens if the agreement ends? I finally asked, my voice barely audible. Pete's face split into that too wide smile. Freedom. For us, the road opens permanently. No more tolls, no more rules. We come and go as we please. He leaned closer. Your kind will adapt or not. Choose now. The digital clock read 3:32 a.m. Outside, the assembled entities began to move, drifting closer to my booth, their forms becoming increasingly difficult to perceive directly, as if my mind couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. 3:33 a.m. Time to choose. It's been 6 months since that night at Plaza C. 6 months since I made my choice. I still dream about it. The procession of entities, the white van, Pete's face splitting into that inhuman grin as he offered me 3 impossible options. In my dreams, I sometimes choose differently. Sometimes I surrender. Sometimes I condemn Teresa. Sometimes I watch the world end as the barriers between realities collapse. But in reality, I chose none of those options. At exactly 3:33 a.m., as the entities closed in around my booth, I remembered something Ryan had written in his original list of rules, something I'd overlooked in my panic and fear. The rules are binding on both sides. The entities couldn't break their own rules any more than I could break mine without consequences. The arrangement wasn't just a trap for humans. It was a constraint on them too. I have a 4th option, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I will stay. I will follow the rules. But you will take no one, not me, not Teresa, not anyone, until the original arrangement's time has elapsed. Pete's borrowed face contorted with rage. Unacceptable. The tribute is overdue. Then the agreement is already broken. By you, not me. I'm offering to mend it. I stood straighter, drawing on some reserve of courage I didn't know I possessed. 2 souls per decade, no more, no less. Ryan was the first this decade. The next isn't due for 5 more years. A murmur ran through the assembled entities, not sound exactly, but a ripple of reaction that distorted the air around them. Pete's body shuddered, his head rotating fully backward before snapping back to face me. The human knows the terms, he hissed, multiple voices no longer in unison but arguing over each other. This is unprecedented. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the entities began to retreat, drifting back toward their vehicles one by one. The last to leave was Mary Ellicott, her featureless face turned toward me as she faded into transparency. Pete collapsed to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. The white van's door slammed shut of its own accord, and the vehicle pulled away, leading the procession back into the darkness. By sunrise, all evidence of that night had vanished, except for Pete, alive but comatose, discovered by the morning shift attendant lying in the toll lane. I still work at Plaza C. Teresa got her promotion to the Denver office a month later, as predicted. She calls occasionally, never directly mentioning what happened, but I can hear the question in her voice. How am I still alive? The truth is, I don't know if my gambit bought me 5 years or just a temporary reprieve. The entities still come through between 3 a.m. and 4:03 a.m. The lightless Cadillac, the occasional pedestrian, even the knockings from inside the booth. But they no longer focus on me specifically, no longer test the boundaries with the same aggression. I follow the rules religiously. I've even added a 7th of my own. Never forget that the rules work both ways. New hires still come and go, none lasting more than a few weeks. I train them all, just as Teresa trained me, but I never share the rules. Let them remain oblivious. Ignorance may not be bliss, but knowledge is definitely dangerous on this stretch of highway. Pete remains in a long-term care facility in Aurora. I visit him sometimes, though he shows no sign of recognizing me or anyone else. The doctors say it's a unique form of catatonia they've never seen before. I know better. As for me, I'm counting down the days. 4 years, 6 months, and 17 days until the next collection is due. Until then, I keep to myself, follow the rules, and collect the tolls, both human and otherwise. Because out here on E470, after midnight, everything has its price, and I've already paid mine.